Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Absolute Insanity. If you guys have been living through this weekend, you've seen the unban of TikTok. You've seen Trump completely pump a crypto coin that recently dumped. Not as dumped as bad as some others. We have no idea where that's going. We're going to talk about the Canadian economy, the stocks that have been pumping, because my God, we still print tendy since the beginning of the year, baby. We're going to talk TD, Telus, Google, Aduro. There's so much happening that I just feel like no one's been able to sleep properly. If you've been like living in this stuff in the portfolio, I think I need to properly update this because I think I'm up a bit more than this. I have to double check the spreadsheet here, but we're up 1.8% according to my spreadsheet. But when I go through the stocks, I think they're up quite a bit more in comparable. But still, how Kyle, how could you schedule this during the playoffs? Best comment ever is, what's the playoffs? I'm not much of a sports fan. That's why we're still doing this. What's up, Patrick? Living the dream is always here, brother. But let's get into this first and foremost. We're going to loop back to the portfolio because I do have some plans with it, but I really want to point out the insanity of this TikTok ban, because the very guy that basically started the ban is now unbanning it. Will remain unnamed. But yeah, this is so beautiful because I think what this is going to largely do is benefit Meta. I know a lot of people have been shitting on Meta through this whole thing, and Google, YouTube. I've seen a lot of people that are giving up on TikTok after all this insanity, like leaving it to the last day. Almost seems like a political stunt to only unban it again. So I don't know. I think a lot of people are learning to diversify, where the more reliable social media accounts are for them. Forget the whole red note thing. I know a lot of people were signing up to like the Chinese version of the app and all that stuff. But the reality is people know YouTube, people know Meta, Instagram Reels. A lot of people I've noticed been really drilling into that. So, the wife should be pretty happy. I'm excited to see what actually ends up coming into fruition, because Meta is so damn big at this point. I don't know if you'd actually see it move the needle or not. But whatever happens with TikTok, I don't think we know quite yet. We will find out. There, everyone just keeps pushing it down. Switch my strategy to buy SCHG and VOO instead of just VOO for higher returns. What's your thoughts? We'll come back around to this in a moment for those of you that are a little bit more growth oriented. But I also want to point out, just to kind of get the short-term news out of the way, and then we can kind of start talking portfolio stock stuff. This Trump thing has been absolutely amazing, because everyone thought it was a joke, but here we have a meme coin that is now large enough to be on the S&P 500 after a day and a half. This thing only just launched, and it was really funny because we were watching it the day that it came out, and we're just I don't have the guts to play the shit coins out here, but I'm like, man, if I had just some crypto money and I was just going to gamble with it, I'm like, just buy it. And then literally we all woke up and the thing was trading at $70. And then it recently just had this massive sell off. The insiders, the people that got started this, there was a lot of close people. I don't know how Trump just woke up after all the crap with the Haktua coin and all this stuff. It's yeah, let's start a meme coin. Let's just see it for $9 billion market cap now. Is quite a bit higher than this when it came out, but absolutely insane. And this is a good comment here, actually. Is it better to buy dividend stocks personally or through a corporation? I'm going to get into that. It's a very interesting conversation. We're going to have some fun with this down the road. I think I just had a really good conversation with a CPA, and I'm going to save it for a different video, but I learned something hilarious about buying Canadian dividend stocks in a corporation. But yeah, anyways, I'm kind of all over the place here. I want to let's drill this in, keep this focused, baby, keep it on track. But yeah, the Trump coin thing is going to be fascinating. I'd love to know what you guys think, whether this thing's going to pump or dump or where it's going to go from here. I know CoffeeZilla has been covering it. On the other realm of somewhat speculation, but where my higher convictions live these days, Aduro Clean Technologies rung the bell, which was super cool. The stock has been selling off since the beginning of the year, which I'm expecting a lot of volatility with this. I know a lot of people are waiting for a pullback, but I'd probably pick up some shares next year on the pullback. I don't know if we're going to get any material news coming out anytime soon, because a lot of us are just waiting for commercialization, news that comes out from the clients. But what I really did like is they represented Aduro very well. For those that are unfamiliar with the story, I think this is a nice little clip and anecdotal introduction to the company.
Aduro Clean Technologies is a developer of innovative chemical technology platforms that break down long, extremely hard to manage hydrocarbon chains into smaller, more valuable components. Aduro can chemically recycle plastic waste, convert heavy crude into lighter, more valuable fuel, and transform renewable oils into higher value fuels.
Let's go.
Aduro's technology delivers significant environmental and economic benefits, offering solutions to global challenges such as plastic waste and sustainable energy. Aduro's new chemical recycling technology is paving the way for creating higher value products from low value materials and waste.
I think this is like, I just don't think people appreciate this enough. It was really nice seeing Ofer and the team that's been like driving this for so long actually on this. So it'll be interesting to see where the stock goes. I know a lot of people in stock twits is rather upset with the lack of like attention. I think they've almost got 1,000 viewers on stock twits, but if this thing got half the attention that like Trump coin or like the robots and all this crap gets for something that can actually change the world and like, actually make, plastics more circular, considering 90% of it is just complete junk. But I'm very excited. So applaud Aduro. It's nice seeing them get the NASDAQ uplisting here and the team kind of bringing it all together. And I'll keep you guys updated as the story goes and how much I'm buying. Because right now I think I'm holding, I don't know how many shares. I've only got about, I think the value's at 4,700 worth CAD or whatever, but I held it in US too. So I'd have to double check, but everything's pretty good. And I'll probably continue to pick up some shares until it's probably in my top 10 positions. On the other spectrum, for those that are looking at the dividend income side of things, it's really nice seeing SCHD pop off in the beginning of the year. I know I kind of reset my gains at the beginning of the year because SCHD has definitely not been pulling off the nice rally that it had after it had that wicked sell-off when the Fed finally pulled back on not cutting interest rates as aggressively. But I'm still holding this. I have no remorse owning this at all. I know a lot of people are, crap talking it constantly these days, but I really like SCHD a lot, man. It's still got a good place in my portfolio, a special place in my heart. It makes up 27% of my portfolio, a little bit more concentrated. But again, when we compare it to like my wife and I, our combined accounts, it's really not as exposed as I initially thought it was. And as I told you guys, I got some focus on the Canadian side of things. And that still continues to be because the Canadian dollar is just continually getting devastated, which is just causing like massive printing of our portfolios. 80% of our net worth between the wife and I is pretty, well, not net worth, but our stock portfolio is in the United States because obviously we own some real estate here in Canada. But that money in the United States dollar, man, I just can't get over it because I mean, you look at like VFV, it's up 2.69% against what? VOO, that's up incomparable. What is it up here today? Yeah, 2.23%. So it really shows you just how terrible our dollar's been. Like even over the last 5 days, it's down almost 1%, which I kind of have a hard time wrapping my head around. But yeah, our dollar just continues to get absolutely obliterated. So we need to see. I think it's going to continue to get obliterated until the U.S. really loosens up and Canada starts, getting its balance sheet under control. But as mentioned, I think the currencies, when it comes to the U.S. dollar, I think it's just purely a way of swading off inflation. I mean, could you imagine if the U.S. dollar was that much weaker and comparable to everyone else's currencies and they had to buy foreign commodities at like actual value instead of getting this like massive bump? Like, I mean, think about it. If you're a foreign investor, right? If I lived in the US right now, man, I would be looking at broad markets. I don't know how you don't at this point if you have a lot of US dollars because everyone's flooded into your dollar. So now you're getting a massive discount globally, like an insane discount. It's kind of disgusting. It's nice to see VDY doing all right since the beginning of the year as well. I mean, VDY is up 1.62% here. It's been on a train actually doing much better than SCHD as of late. And I'm also glad the position sizing we have in here. I think between the wife and I, it's like maybe around 20%, 18% or something like that. I mean, yeah, these positions for dividend income, I do still love a lot. And we're starting to see the performance, I think, mostly driven by TD. TD really popped off in the last week, which was kind of a bit of a shock. TD's been the absolute gutter. And, I don't think it's justified. I mean, everyone is money laundering. I mean, there's a lot of money laundering between all the banks. It's just TD got caught, let's be real. And it wasn't a small amount of money being laundered either. But I mean, you take a look at the stock, right? And it's never been able to get out of the gutter that it's been in. If you take a look at the dividend yield and stuff, I mean, you're paying a dividend yield TD has never paid in its entire history. So a lot of us have been debating on, I'm like a Pokemon card collector. You just kind of got to have them all, which is why I like VDY still so much. But you got to recognize that TD is trying to step up and clean up that rhetoric. Because again, unfortunately, perspective is reality in stocks, and that perception can really drive the momentum. And it's crazy that, they're going to cut the pay of 41 executives in the wake of this money laundering scandal, which, like I said, I think they're just doing that to clean up, the insanity. And I honestly don't think it has much to do with the CEO. Money laundering happens regardless. Crypto, a lot of money laundering probably in crypto, the banks, there's people funneling, God knows, you never know, right? Like you get a family sending money over, they put it in the bank. It's just funny how they're kind of navigating this, but hey, they're doing the right things, putting it in the right direction. The only thing that I'm paying attention to is earnings. Bank earnings are coming up here fairly soon. And like I said, you look at TD's earnings from 13.1 billion to 15.5 just this time last year. Like their revenue growth has just been astonishing. And it's kind of comparable when you look at the U.S. banks and how well they've been performing. Canadian banks have been just kind of lacking at best, with the exception of Royal Bank that did very well last year, and some of the banks starting to see a nice recovery. But this year they're not taking off as much, right? Like Royal Bank's kind of flat, Canadian Imperial's flat, Bank of Nova Scotia's down 3%. So, I mean, the banking sector has been way more resilient in the US, but we don't have earnings yet. So it's going to be really neat to see if the Canadian banks can keep holding up and we start seeing a further recovery. But yeah, we can talk about Telus because I think that's an interesting one. And I saw a lot of interesting comments on my video. So I did buy a little bit of Telus, and I didn't buy it with like huge conviction here or anything. I only bought how much did I buy? Like a couple $1,000s worth, like barely 100 shares. And I only just bought it because I want to keep an eye on it from here. And, it's easier to pay attention to a stock if I own it. So Telus for me, is just one of these companies where it's hard to tell if they're coming or going right now because, they just increased the dividend, but people are, the free cash flow is kind of deteriorated, but it's starting to come back. Their operating cash flow is incredible. Like they've been able to maintain some pretty strong operating cash flow, but we're going to start seeing hopefully the debt come down. The restructuring costs are out of the way. We've seen a recovery for the most part in their net income. Well, not like a full recovery, but in the net income is starting to come back up. Materially, we've kind of gone through this massive down phase, and I think we're finally catching the bottom here. And we should hopefully start seeing a bit of a recovery. But I'll have no remorse if I'm wrong and I have to sell it if the company continues to get hindered or, we start seeing like massive destructiveness. But I've been listening to a lot of people that are much smarter than I am, and they're kind of comparing it to what Telus and these telecom giants went through during the .com era. Because again, these companies are very expensive when they go through these restructuring costs. They're kind of getting the tailwind of higher interest rate debt because their current, I think, rate on their debt is like 4.4% or something. And that should hopefully materially start to come down. So I am making a bet on it, not as much for a dividend play, but I look at it as if it stabilizes here, I can get the full rate of return from the dividend. And presuming the company continues to perform and things start to level off and the company can sustain the dividend and everything, I think this could be an incredible buying opportunity for Canadians. Because again, these are monopolies. It's just like when the banks crashed. It's a very rare opportunity, but again, we don't know how long this is going to last, but they're not going to go anywhere, right? And they've got huge investments. The problem too is like the capex on this company is crazy because they're investing like how much is Telus investing? I mean, it's a god awful amount of money. Telus fiber investments, because I think until 2028 they're investing something like 17 billion. Like they're investing a huge amount, investing 24 billion in Ontario through 2028. Like, I mean, they have so much capex expenditure, like just kind of continue to scale, which is awesome because fiber is cheaper than copper. So a lot of what they're upgrading actually comes with lower infrastructure costs, which is great. But yeah, I don't know. They got a foothold in a lot of things, and I'm excited to see what happens. But yeah, they also have the tailwind of immigration being cut. It's going to be a rough couple years, right? Like, I mean, you have to accept that you can't be buying this stock, presuming it's just going to turn around tomorrow. I'm just presuming. I'm going to keep an eye on the next couple quarter of earnings, presuming things stabilize. I've got a nice little starter position, and I might buy a bit more. Why is Rogers not recovering? That's a good one too. It's interesting. I don't care for Rogers as much, but you have to recognize they are probably the better of the three right now from a balance sheet perspective and a performance perspective. But yeah, I'm not sure. It kind of just got dragged down with the rest of them. It's like everyone just said, we don't want to have any exposure to this sector. And a lot of people just absolutely dumped them. Honestly, like Pokemon cards, you could probably just collect all of these and just see what happens. But personally, I don't like Bell as much. I'm not a big fan of Rogers, even though we use Rogers for internet here. This whole stream is brought to you by Rogers, by the way, not sponsored, but nonetheless. Yeah, so I'm excited to see what happens, and I'm just going to keep an eye on it. But yeah, as far as I can tell, like I said, I've been arguing with people about it. I just don't like the dilution as much, but they have been slowing down on the diluting. But who knows? What do you guys think? You think Telus is a turnaround here? I know I've been getting a lot of mixed reactions from you guys out there. But finally, my last and most favorite stock that I'm very glad the wife and I scaled and has become probably the largest single stock position we've owned in a while. Very, very sizable, especially with the weighting we have with it in the S&P, which is Google. And yeah, I've noticed that a lot of dividend investors, a lot of people out there converting to Google, man. I noticed PPC in, which finally, my boy, I don't know if you guys follow this guy. I'll pull him up real quick. I was very excited to see him converting and recognizing the strategy of traditional dividend stocks is not what it used to be. And I was very happy to see that, he actually started to buy Google because he just said it's not like it used to be, right? Like when you're talking about stocks like Pepsi and J&J, all these traditional, like legacy dividend kings, like they are very much falling behind the traditional tech companies that are going to become the new dividend kings. Because I mean, you have to recognize Google, Meta, like these companies that are now introducing dividends, they have a far more superior balance sheet. They have far more growth ahead of them. They're going to be able to increase the dividends much more, do way more share buybacks, have way more capital appreciation. And I mean, right now, who can buy Apple comfortably, right? So everyone, I think, is finally waking up and turning to Google. We kind of all had our back and forths with it, and now people are like, "Yay, Google!" So, we'll see if Apple comes back down to a more reasonable valuation. I mean, it's trading at around a 34 PE still, which is pretty high. So I'm very excited to see what earnings are going to look like for the big tech companies. And then obviously after that, we get the Canadian banks and some of the Canadian telcos, and we'll get some of the Canadian tech companies as well. But what are you guys saying? A lot of people are mad that Rogers bought out Shaw. They don't want to support them, especially in the West. Yeah, I don't I mean, Rogers has legacy sports, which I don't care for. I hate legacy media altogether. I don't watch sports. I don't watch Crave. We use other ways of watching content where I'm not paying these horrible streaming fees. But yeah, so anyways, what's going on here? Thoughts on CNR continuing to increase after tomorrow's events? CNR, maybe. I'm more excited for like Enbridge and some of the energy companies just to see what's going to happen on the back of, Trump getting in, because I don't think he's going to do tariffs. If he does, it's going to be a wild ride, and I'm very excited to see how it all pans out. But I somehow highly doubt it. I feel like Trump says a lot of stuff. I mean, he has till tomorrow to end the Ukraine war, which he said he'd do before he got into office, which hasn't happened because something tells me he was expecting Ukraine to give up some of their sovereignty, but it's probably not going to happen. So we'll see what actually comes into fruition. Canadian National is trading at a great discount here, in my opinion, though. I think it's a good stabilizer because it's got low volatility behind it. But again, I'm kind of mixing my portfolio between like trying to get better performance when I'm buying individual stocks. And, I always like Canadian National Railway as a stabilizer, but, its growth has just not been that astounding. And I just don't know what its growth looks like ahead of it. This is why I never really buy it, but I think it's great stock. Buying individual stocks is so much harder than it used to be because you really kind of got to narrow in. It's why I've really taken the time to, and same with my, if you guys want to see how my wife and our portfolios look together, you can go to kylelivingston.com, links in the description below. You can sign up to my courses or my WhatsApp group, and I'll do monthly updates for our combined accounts. But we're very focused on very particular individual stocks. We do have quite a bit of exposure to individual tech, but most of it's in Google and Meta. Google and Meta are by far our two largest weightings, and they take up a significant percentage. I think it's probably closer to somewhere between 13 to 15% of our entire portfolios. And that's the core concentration for individual. And then I'm just kind of being very, hand selecting here when it comes to Aduro and Telus and some of these smaller cap companies. But those come with a different form of risk. And I'm looking at those a little farther out than I am perhaps shorter term with Google's performance. I just think Google's going to crush earnings. I think we'll do great there. And it should hopefully ride some of the tech volatility if Telus or Tesla, Apple, Nvidia, if those stocks start to level off a bit. So I'm going to be a bit careful. But I don't know if it's a dream come true yet. Let's not get too excited. We're in the midst of insanity, and I'm trying to catch a falling knife. So we'll see what happens. But I took my first position in WonderFi. Might be crazy, but only put in what I'm willing to lose. Yeah, I mean, that's the game, right? That's the game. Got to be prepared, man, when you're picking some of those, high flyers. What else are we missing in here? Is it better to buy dividend stocks personally, or let's talk about this. So I'm going to be releasing a video here, hopefully in the coming week, because I sat down with another Canadian YouTuber who is a CPA. And one of the most fascinating things that I think is hilarious is going to blow your mind. Are you ready for this? Because it just makes me giggle like a little schoolgirl. If you buy a Canadian dividend stock and the company makes at least 50% of its income in Canada in a corporate investment account, you do not pay tax on the dividend income because the Canadian government says, oh, it's just, one corporation moving money to another corporation, and it was already taxed in the one corporation. So they'll actually let you get dividend income tax-free in the corporate account. And then what you can do with that dividend is use it for taxable expenses. So if you want to go on a trip and you're like me, a social media influencer, and you're going to go do D&D on, maybe something like Royal Caribbean, like I did last year, you could literally use the dividend that you got tax-free and go right off a trip tax-free. And like, it's like one of the most corrupt things. Like he's like, yeah, it exists. It's a real reality of what I really recommend doing is what he told me to do is, I think it's Wealth. I'll look it up real quick. I think Wealth Simple has a tax calculator. And he said they actually have a really good tax calculator, because what you're playing around with is something called a qualified dividend, where you get dividend tax credits. And yeah, I think he says you can actually mess around with this and get a real clerical idea of how dividends are taxed. And it's probably like one of the most interesting things, man. I'm telling you, like the most unappreciated reality and the final boss of investing in Canada or anywhere is opening up a corporation or becoming a sole proprietor. And you could literally start that by saying, I'm going to start a social media account. I might not make any money at it in the beginning, but if I just start something, regardless, it's a hobby. If it's a hobby I'm doing already, DJing, cooking, I don't care what it is, just post it, do something with it, get it in the public, and then just start using your salary or your income from your job to expense the sole proprietor business that you're running. And you could get so much fucking tax money back. And it bothers me so much that like people don't do this or understand it. But yeah, so if you take a look in here, I think it doesn't have you eligible dividends. So let's just say you make like 25K in eligible dividends. How much are you going to pay here? So look at that. The tax you're going to pay on 25,000 in eligible dividends is $300. So this guy was telling me that like it's not really fair because the entire tax structure in Canada is set up for the rich. So if you have, say, $10 million and like you're loaded and you have it, you got $10 million and you're collecting dividend income, your tax is way less, because a lot of that could be eligible dividends depending on how you have it invested. And you're going to pay way less on those dividends than somebody actually working to make $10 million. It's really not fair. I don't think like the whole way this is set up is just hilarious, but I highly recommend, messing around with this Wealth Simple tax calculator, because it'll blow your mind when you really start realizing, like, between different accounts and corporations and sole proprietorship and all this stuff, how you can manipulate and manage money without having to pay, any real severe tax liabilities. It kind of blows my mind. And like I said, it's hard to explain because I get debated a lot, because a lot of people are like, oh, passive income in a corporation is taxed at 50%, but I'm like, not really. There's a lot of ways to avoid paying a 15% on passive income. But again, he also told me that they constantly update the tax laws. So, what was the inclusion rate? They were supposed to increase it on capital gains to like 63% or something was the inclusion rate, but that hasn't even passed yet. And we don't even know if it's going to pass. So, I mean, it's a fascinating realm of what I continue to call the final boss. After you've maxed your TFSA, you max your RRSP, the last thing you really need to figure out is how to manipulate taxable income in a legal way. I'm not saying do it nefariously or break the tax laws. I'm just saying these are the actual laws that exist, and it's kind of confusing. Buy Canadian banks individually? No, use HBNK. I don't think you need to buy them individually, but what I would do is buy the HBNK ETF, because it's way better than the BMO, and it comes with much, much lower expense ratios. I think it's like less than half the expense ratio of ZEBs. So just keep that in mind. As for banks I currently hold, HBNK. Yeah, you got this. This guy's got it under control. He figured it out. Globex is coming out with a lot of good ETFs that really, really make a big difference. But yeah, so I mean, I'm going to be releasing that video. You guys can kind of subscribe for that if you want to check that out, because taxes and dividends and baby. Canada, like I said, you can get rich almost anywhere if you figured it out. But I think what really screws people is like when you get in too high of a tax bracket and then you're not sure what you're doing. But I mean, if you still take advantage of your RSP, I mean, you should see a huge reduction in some of the tax liability and all that stuff. Like I said, it's crazy. It honestly blows my mind. It kind of comes back to like when you figure out compound interest and then you're able to figure all this stuff out on top of it and you layer it. You gotta really sit down with some rich people. I mean, rich people really figured out a lot of this. Yeah, what F is Trump doing with the meme coin and tanking? Bitcoin's not tanking. Isn't Bitcoin crushing it? Let's take a look at the broader markets real quick, and we'll do some Q&As and finish up. But I'm really curious because I figure the markets are going to pump tomorrow because of how well everything's been doing in the market, the markets aren't open tomorrow, right? The U.S. markets, anyways. But isn't why is Bitcoin dropping off? I mean, it was pumping there pretty good, 104K. I wonder why. Is there any news why Bitcoin's selling off? I can't imagine it's just because of the Trump coin, right? Is there any news here? Let's just look it up here real quick. Bitcoin price dips below 100K in dramatic market shift. Biggest Bitcoin price test income. I don't know. I'll have to take a look. I only follow crypto for fun, not for too much serious investing. But what do you guys think about looming commercial real estate mortgages coming up for renewal, and how office buildings will be empty and banks will be huge defaults? I don't think it's going to be the case for the most part. I think what's really interesting is condos are coming up like crazy in the Canadian markets. Like Toronto has seen like a huge influx of condos, yet single family homes are still selling. Actually prices of homes have increased over the last year. Honestly, it doesn't matter if mortgages come up for renewal, because what people have to understand, the only time it's a concern for the bank is if home prices come down. So if I can't afford my mortgage and the bank seizes it and puts it up for auction to retain their value back, so long as the house is able to sell at market value, or at least what that person paid for it, or what the mortgage value is, the bank's not going to default. There's no economic collapse unless the value of real estate comes down. And that's when things get real scary, because if prices drop too much, then the bank is going to call you on that loan and require you put more down. That's a scary situation. But the banks, I don't know if you've tried to get a mortgage in Canada, but it's a fucking nightmare. And the banks, I think, are resilient enough, and they had enough hoops and hurdles to survive any kind of downturn. But currently, I hold XEQT, VFV, VDY, XEI, TEC, my TFSA, VOO, SCHD, SCGH, my RSP. Focusing on TFSA this year, I think this is a good investment. I'm 38 and just started 2 months ago around 18K. Now, this is great. I think you're doing this really intelligently, putting all your US stocks in your RSP. I don't mind like holding some of your US, like for instance, like VOO doesn't pay enough of a dividend, or if you're buying growth stocks, like SCHD is growth, is it not? SCHG, I'm pretty sure that's a growth one, isn't it? I think you'd be better off putting some of those growth ETFs into your, again, not financial advice, by the way, this is just my personal opinion, but if it's not paying you much of a dividend, you can put it in your TFSA, because the capital gains will be tax-free. And if you expect to get a lot more capital gains than dividend growth, say from, I guess you got VFV, in your TFSA already. But yeah, I would recommend maybe kind of making sure you got the growth split up, because, if you're going to hold it for 30 years and you're like, obviously growth should return higher capital than, a dividend stock in a sense. So, if you're going to pull out the capital gains, you'll probably be in a better tax situation putting some of that in your TFSA. Do you follow Rick Rule? I do not. But tell me what's up. Tell me what's up with the guy. What do you think of the clown show, a liberal leadership race? Honestly, it's a complete, Muppets for the most part. I told you guys, even in my chat groups, we're getting very political, and I try and remain, I'm not biased. Like, I think a lot of these guys are jokes, and a lot of people take them too seriously, but I'm not going to lose friends over this shit. I don't really care at the end of the day. But Trump, look at Trump. Here you got a guy that's a convicted felon that was able to waive any charges that he had, and he comes into presidency pumping a shit coin that he's made billions of dollars on. Here's a guy that literally caused the TikTok ban and is now reverting the TikTok ban. I'm like, the guy doesn't, like, is he coming or going? Does he care about the people? Is he just trying to get rich in this process? I don't, it's so confusing. And then on the Canadian side of the border, you have Trudeau, who all of his policies have been absolutely destructive. The guy raised carbon tax in the middle of an inflationary cycle, which pumped oil prices. They were having mass immigration during a period where we knew we had issues with supply and demand around healthcare workers. A lot of supply and demand issues in real estate, but they waited for it to be a fucking problem before they started doing anything. And honestly, what pissed me off the most was the fact that if you mentioned anything about immigration being a problem, you were considered a racist. Nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Nobody wanted to talk about the immigration. And then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, immigration's a problem. It pissed me off a lot. They just mismanaged the whole thing. And now, it just gives me ick vibes. It's just like the real estate problem here. It's so expensive to build. So what do? They introduce a new plan that allows you to put a modular home in your backyard that you can rent out, which then changes the tax liability of your residence. So if you have a primary residence, be prepared to lose any gains you're going to make on rental income to taxable liabilities, especially if you plan on selling that house in the future, because, rental income properties are a lot different than if you have a primary residence. So be careful if you own a house and you think you're going to put modular homes in the backyard. But yeah, it's super annoying. I think a lot of this is mismanaged, but it's politics, right? I don't let politics dictate the food that's going to be put on my table. I'm not gambling on it. So I just be careful. I'd vote for you. Please run. Hell no. Here's the problem, right? It's not, I don't feel like one person will ever have a say. I mean, look at what Trump ran on. Look at what, like, even the Democrats ran on, or even here in Canada. Like, everything the liberals are saying, everything the conservatives are saying, half of that shit, more than half of it, isn't going to be reality. And I hate it. I hate that it's political theater is like literally the definition of a grift. I'm just gonna like say everything you need to hear, even though half of it will not get resolved. Like, because there's just so much at play, right? Like, it's a very mismangled. Trump almost got assassinated, and the dude still wants to run. Like, you're a fucking billionaire with a great family. Like why not enjoy it and find some other like passion in life, other than like putting your family through insanity and the amount of hate. Like, look at Trudeau. He walks around the street and people like call him out. He'll have that for the rest of his life. Who enjoys that? You have to be like psychotic to some extent. You have to have some kind of egomania to be a politician, I think. You have to lie. You have to pump shit coins. I just don't get it. But to be fair, the provincial premiers begged for massive influxes of temporary foreign workers in 20. Yeah, but they didn't do it intelligently. That was the thing that's annoying, right? Now they're doing it intelligently, because now they're making it so basically, like, if you come into this country, you have to work here if you're educated here. They're no longer allowing you to be educated here and leave. So if you come here and you're going to become a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, you can't go back to your country and serve over there. And that's the same thing with the immigrants that are coming over. Like, they're changing the whole system around now, which should have been done when we realized this, like during the pandemic. Like, I mean, you look at it, the policies, and they were just so mismanaged because we knew there was a problem. Like, everybody was complaining about it, but only just now, within the last like 6 months, has anyone brought it up. Also released a meme coin today. Oh my God. Oh my God. Like I said, I'm enjoying the show. I'm politically biased. I really don't care if it was Trump or whoever. It's just, Kamala, what does it matter at this point? What's your opinion on Chemtrade on the TSX? Seems like a good company in a niche sector. We'll take a look. We'll do a few more Q&As here, guys, and we'll take a look at some of your stocks. I've never heard of the Chemtrade. What is Chemtrade? It's like a chemical stock. I'll take 2 seconds at it, but I'm not going to do a full breakdown on the stream. Bore you guys. Chemtrade, a logistics income fund. Ooh, that's interesting. What's probably high yielder, I imagine. It's option ETF based, 5.7.2% yield. Looks like there's some volatility to it. I don't know. I have to take a look at it. A logistics income fund. Interesting. Doing it intelligently wasn't what Doug Ford and the gang were asking for. I agree that it was nonsense, but I think the blame needs to be spread around a bit. I did a little research on QMax. 100K invested would make $2 a month in dividends. Why aren't we all on this? I was being a bit dramatic and shouting you out for making that move. Not everyone could do it themselves. In what sense? I'd love a video on business tax law fund. I'm very interested in once I get my TFSA maxed out. I got to do some videos on it. I think it's one of the weirdest, most convoluted things that just doesn't make sense, but everyone thinks they know what they're talking about. I have no idea. I'm actually just doing it. Do you own IDK? I own some shares in my corporation. I don't talk about a few. I have a lot of stocks I don't talk about. Because they're either too small, they're like work related, because 3D has been a sponsor of the channel. So I got like, they've been not doing so great, but some of their holding companies have been doing amazing. But yeah, there's 3D. We still own MindMed. Like, we actually have shares in MindMed still. I have a couple private placements that I don't know what's happening with them. They still exist as companies, and I have no idea what's going to happen to them. But these are more speculative in nature, right? So I just hold them. They're like, they could go to zero, and it's not going to like impact our returns by any metric, because they're just small caps, right? Like, you got to treat them with the right position sizing, and you just don't want to take too much risk, because 9 out of 10 companies you're going to buy that are more speculative like that are likely not going to make money, which everyone gets enraged about on the internet for some reason. But if you're like me, and I've made most of my fortune off small cap companies, or a decent chunk of my fortune off small caps, like, I have nothing against them. In fact, I think it's annoying the government doesn't allow people to get involved in private placements. Because, I mean, like, could you imagine if you could have bought SpaceX shares? Like, you couldn't unless you were accredited, which is annoying. Kyle, how do you currently convert to USD for your RSP? I just want the I just saw that Interactive Brokers does not charge a big Actually, most of the banks don't. Royal Bank doesn't charge any fees. I was doing the math on Bank of Nova Scotia, and it's really not far off. If they're charging anything, it's probably 1% or less. As far as I could tell, because I thought they were charging 2.5, but there's no way, because I just did some converting, and when I ran the math, it wasn't a lot, if any. But yeah, the big banks are the best right now for dollar conversions, because Royal Bank can literally convert any dollar you want if you're a client without charging a fee. Have you tried using Webull? They're great. I should use them. I notice a lot of people use them. They're good for reading charts and stuff. Got out of my XEI position and moving it into VDY. I had made dividend plays split between the two, but I prefer VDY. Yeah, passively weighted ETFs always went out long term. I don't think you could throw a dart at a board and find better performance than passively weighted ETFs, because equal weight always does shitty. That's why I'm like half and half with SCHD, because SCHD is not market cap weighted, but they've done a good job managing it. Do you know Canadians can do covered calls out of the TFSA, make more dollars tax free? If that's possible, that's fascinating. I haven't looked into it too much, because I don't know what the government defines as day trading or too much trading in a TFSA. Thanks for the content. You seem like a great dude. Appreciate it greatly, Jeremy, and I appreciate all of you for showing up this evening. A quick stream, but stay cool, stay awesome, guys. And as always, I look forward to catching you in the next one. Cheers.